one day out of the year, all they needed to do is walk into a temple, cross their heart, cross their fingers, whatever, and say, Caesar is Lord. And then for 364 days, they could go worship Jesus. Simple thing. But not these hard-headed, hard-nosed ancestors of ours in the faith. A lot of them would not have been thrown to the lions if they would have just said, what do you say? I just set this one day aside for the pagans, keeps them happy, keeps them off my back, and 364 days it's Jesus all the way. When Jesus is Lord of the life, He is the Lord 24/7, 52. And so if it looks like it's overkill, if they overreacted, they did not overreact given their clear understanding of who Jesus Christ is. Protestation, what a word, I like it. A strong and intense disavowal and protest of something, but a strong and intense affirmation of something else. So as the proclamation unfolds, we see their stated purpose and we see the proclamation once again. Men, why are you doing these things? We are also men of the same nature as you, and preach the gospel to you, that you should turn from these vain things to a living God, who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that is in them. We get just a thumbnail sketch of what he had to say. We'll see a broader statement of it when we get to Acts chapter 17. But notice the statement of purpose, that they were in Lystra to turn people from the vanity of idolatry to the living God. You are worshiping and serving things that have no essence, no substance, and no real value apart from what you give it in your mind. And for this reason, you will continue to live a life of emptiness. And thus, we are telling you that there is another way. Turn from this way of emptiness and turn to God through Jesus Christ, who gives fullness and completeness forever. They stated their purpose, that they were there to tell the people that this is good news, since the living God desires them to turn to Him. And their proclamation of the good news, they owe their allegiance and worship to the living God because He is their Creator. They owe their allegiance and worship to the living God, who is not only their Creator, but He is the one who sustains them. And yet He, the living and true God, did not leave Himself without witness, in that He did good. And He gave you rains from heaven and fruitful seasons, satisfying your hearts with food and gladness. If God was not there, if He were not there for you, even in your disbelief, you would feel the full impact of emptiness. But because of His kindness, He still stood as a witness to who He is and gave you the rains from heaven and the fruitful seasons. Notice, not only just for your physical, biological need, but also for your psychological and emotional self, satisfying your hearts with food and gladness. They owe their allegiance and worship to Him who sustains them, not only created them, but sustains them. And Paul brings up this point again later. For it's in Him that we live and move and we exist. As even some of your poets have said, for we are also His children. Notice that. It is in the living and true God, the one who creates. It is in Him and by His sustaining strength that we have the abundance that we do, that we have the motions and the accomplishments that we have. And we continue to exist because of Him. At the end of the day, every generation will finally come around to stand before Him, in whom we live, we move, and we have our very existence. Notice that in days gone by, it is this living and true God who had given them what they wanted. And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper. As a race, there came a time when we might acknowledge that He is there, but we want nothing to do with Him as He is. To acknowledge Him in this same chapter of Romans to the extent of being thankful for all that He does for us as His creatures. So the living God gave to them what they really wanted: freedom from Him. And in the generations gone by, He permitted all the nations to go their own ways. You want to be free from me? Fine, turn and go. And now we spend the rest of our lives reading history about what life is like when we exercised our freedom of will to turn and walk away from Him. We've made the choice, live with the consequences. Something that we don't really like to do. We like to blame Him. No one is a true atheist. I learned that in philosophy class years ago. A true atheist needs to have God there to blame Him for all the foul-ups that they have created. And then they can go happily on their way from one miserable wreck to another. And isn't it Toynbee who has given us the history of 26 empires that have risen and fallen? And what have they accomplished that would be of any help? Some have given us canals and waterways. Some have given us beautiful hanging gardens. Some have given to us actual beautiful works of art and sculptures. Some great architecture. But what has it done for the heart and the soul of humankind? Yet He still would present Himself as a witness toward them. And so the Apostle Paul and Barnabas would say, those days are gone. He's given you the time to walk away from Him and take a look at your historical books, your scrolls, your tablets. Has it made civilization or humanity any better to walk away from "you shall love the Lord your God with all your being and love your neighbor as yourself"? Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God is now declaring to men that all people everywhere should repent, because He has fixed the day in which He will judge the world in righteousness through a man whom He has appointed, having furnished proof to all men by raising Him from the dead. Those days of going your own way are over.